Chester and would administer lethal doses of diamorphine to his victims. Once the death certificate was signed, Shipman would edit the victims' medical records to make it look like they had been unwell, leading up to their untimely deaths. The majority of his victims were older, widowed women. That's crazy. Over 200 people. I wonder what it was that actually got him caught. Maybe we'll have to look more about it afterwards. Number 2 is Peter Sutcliffe. With a total of 22 kills, Peter Sutcliffe is the UK's second most prolific serial killer and is also known most commonly as the Yorkshire Ripper. He was sentenced to 20 consecutive life sentences in prison and died in 2020. Mirroring Jack the Ripper, Sutcliffe's victims were all women, and many of them were found in red light district areas. He claimed that God had sent him on a mission to kill prostitutes. He was found to have killed 22 women and had attempted to murder 7 others. That's horrifying. Mimicking Jack the Ripper, that's very violent and very hateful and very gory. Thank God for the 7 who managed to get away. I imagine they played a big part in also identifying and testifying against him. Number 3 is Mary Ann Cotton. One of the few females on the serial killer list, Mary Ann Cotton killed 21 people between 1865 and 1873. She was executed for poisoning and killing her stepson, but it came to light that she had actually murdered many more people, including 11 out of her 13 children. She also killed 3 out of 4 of her husbands, her motivation being to access their insurance policies. Her murder weapon of choice was arsenic, a deadly poison. How on earth somebody could ever murder their children is beyond me. Number 4, Dennis Nilsen. Dennis Nilsen was a Scottish serial killer who murdered at least 12 young men and boys in London from 1975 to 1983. Despite killing 12 people that we know of, he was convicted of 6 counts of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. For his crimes, Nilsen was sentenced to life imprisonment, which he served until his death in 2018. Due to the location of the latter half of Nilsen's murders, he was given the nickname of the Muswell Hill murderer, Muswell Hill being a district in North London. I wonder why he was only convicted of 6. Did they not have injuries and causing grievous bodily harm to a further six at Grantham and Kesteven Hospital, Lincolnshire, between February and April 1991. So that's another nurse one. God, it's terrifying that people in such a profession, when they're supposed to help people out, can do such evil things. Okay, so this is the top 10 serial killer list that they've made. And 1, 2, 5 are the ones that we read just now. Not including Beverly, she's number 7. It goes sideways, not down. I read it wrong. Next one is Fred West. Let's see who Fred West is. Frederick Walter Stephen West was an English serial killer and child molester who committed at least 12 murders between 1967 and 1987 in Gloucestershire, England. The majority with his second wife, Rose West. The victims were girls and young women. So he's number 6, and there's Beverly at 7. Number 8 is Patrick McKay. Let's see, Patrick McKay. David Groves, better known by his birth name Patrick David McKay, is believed to be one of the United Kingdom's most prolific serial killers. He was convicted of 3 counts of manslaughter and 2 additional cases that were left to lie on file. And we've got Rosemary West, that was the wife of Fred West. That's number 9. And then number 10 is John George. Let's Google John George. John George, commonly known as the acid bath murderer, was an English serial killer convicted for the murders of 6 people, although he claimed to have killed 9. Let's read more on that one, that seems interesting. He battered to death or shot his victims and disposed of their bodies using sulfuric acid before forging their signatures so he could sell their possessions and collect large sums of money. His actions were the subject of the television film A is for Acid, and he has, in this picture that I'm looking at, he has the Hitler stash. That's crazy. That's insane. Another one is John Christie, a sexual psychopath who was hanged in 1953 after confessing to killing his wife and at least 5 other women at his home. Bodies were laid on the floors in the garden and in a papered over cupboard at Christie's home in London. Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. Brady murdered 5 children with his lover and accomplice Hindley during a sadistic 2-year reign of terror in the 1960s. most notorious, most fucked up, the worst of the worst, by literally every site here that I can find. We're gonna read a bit more on Harold Shipman. Harold Shipman, sometimes called the Angel of Death, is considered Britain's most prolific serial killer. For decades, Harold Shipman was known as the Good Doctor, a GP in the British town of Hyde who was always happy to make house calls to visit his elderly patients. But behind the friendly facade of a retiring family man was a monster with a secret. Shipman was Britain's most prolific serial killer. Targeting mostly older women, the GP's modus operandi was almost always the same. He would call on his patient at home to treat a mild ailment, inject her with a deadly dose of morphine, hold her medical notes to suggest she'd been gravely ill, and then encourage the family to opt for a cremation over burial to incinerate any evidence of his crimes. When he was finally caught, he was convicted of 15 murders, but an inquiry later concluded that he might have killed as many as 250 patients, the youngest a 4-year-old girl. By the time he died in prison in January 2004, Shipman had earned himself a new nickname, the Angel of Death. His motive remains something of an enigma. While most serial killers are driven by the pursuit of sex or money, Shipman seemed to simply enjoy choosing who lived and who died. He was exercising the ultimate power of controlling life and death, and repeated it so often that he must have found the drama of taking life to his taste. Prosecutor Richard Henriques said during the murder trial. But perhaps the greatest mystery of all is why a serial killer as careful as Shipman made a string of errors with his final victim. Always quiet and methodical in his violence, Shipman suddenly became sloppy as he made a wealthy widow his next target. The murder of Kathleen Grundy and the trail of evidence that pointed directly to a doctor's involvement left investigators wondering if the Angel of Death wanted to be caught. The tragedy that may have shaped the killer's life. The defining event of Shipman's strange and violent life bears eerie similarities to his future career as Britain's worst serial killer. At the age of 17, his beloved mother, Vera, became terminally ill with lung cancer. There was nothing doctors could do but make her comfortable in her final months, and a young Shipman watched as she was given large doses of morphine to keep the pain at bay. Shipman refused to ever talk about his motives, but soon after his mother's death, he enrolled in Leeds University Medical School to become a doctor. He married his wife Primrose, and together they had 4 children. When he graduated, he got a job at Pontefract General Infirmary in West Yorkshire, where he may have committed his first murder. In 1972, Shipman was a 26-year-old junior doctor assigned to look after Susie Garvett, a 4-year-old suffering from pneumonia triggered by her quadriplegia and cerebral palsy. Her mother later told the Shipman Inquiry that the young doctor encouraged her to go have a cup of tea so soon gives rise to the suspicion that Shipman somehow precipitated the death. The inquiry chairwoman, Dame Janet Smith, said in 2005. The girl's death did not arouse suspicions at the time, and Shipman soon completed his hospital internship and joined a private practice in West Yorkshire. There, his colleagues soon began to notice that large quantities of the painkiller pethidine were going missing. When Shipman was discovered in 1976, he was hopelessly addicted to the drug, injecting himself with 600 to 700 milligrams of pethidine a day, so much that his veins had begun to collapse. It is indeed a very sad case that almost at the beginning of your career you should find yourself in this position. Magistrate Maurice Golden told Shipman when he fined him $1,200 for obtaining a drug by deception, as well as 7 counts of forgery. I imagine that's supposed to be pounds and not dollars, unless they did the conversion stuff. Shipman agreed to enter counseling and attend a rehab program, so he was not struck off the medical register. His reprieve allowed him to join a practice in Hyde, where he quickly established himself as a pillar of the community. It was also the place where he began to kill on an industrial scale. Dr. Jekyll moves to Hyde. Hyde is a small town on the fringes of Manchester, not far from the vast swathes of windswept, isolated moorland for which the area is famous. It also has a grisly past. Throughout the 60s, local Hyde couple Ian Brady and Myra Hindley would kidnap children from the area, drive them out to the surrounding moors and murder them. By the time Shipman moved in, Hyde hoped there was nothing left to fear. But they were wrong. Shipman set up a thriving doctor's surgery on Market Street, which soon boasted a patient list of nearly 3,000 people. I genuinely thought he would be a great doctor. He was a great doctor, very intelligent. Former patient Paul Spence later told God. I went to see him with different things, and he always had time to talk. You would expect to be kept waiting, but you accepted it because you knew he would spend time with you. There was a year-long wait to get onto his list. He was the most popular doctor in Hyde. Locals remembered him as an odd, gruff figure. His house was famously spooky, swallowed up by ivy and weeds, and he was known to be rude and arrogant to his colleagues. But his patients adored him. Many patients describe Shipman as having a wonderful bedside manner, especially with the elderly, Dame Janet later concluded. He would make much of them and sometimes tease them gently. They liked it. He made them feel that he was a real friend as well as their doctor. Yet, he would kill them. He could be blunt with his patients' loved ones, but they often appreciated his candor. In February 1998, when the son-in-law of a 77-year-old patient asked how much longer he had, Shipman tersely responded, I wouldn't buy him Easter eggs. What made Shipman really special in the eyes of the community was how willing he was to make house calls. It took decades before some locals noticed the correlation between Shipman's visits to elderly patients' bedside and their sudden unexplained demise. Usually, he would wait until the relative left the room before he injected his patient with diamorphine hydrochloride. against asking for a post-mortem. Some of his descriptions of sudden death are breathtaking. Team Janet wrote in the shipment inquiry findings. I turned around to get my stethoscope out of my bag and she just collapsed and died. I was telephoning for an ambulance and she gave one cough. When I turned around, I could see that she had died. She just died while I was examining her. There were periods during Shipman's decades-long career as a serial killer when he stopped for a while, usually because an attempted murder had gone wrong or a nurse who was a stickler for paperwork became suspicious of him. But these brief periods of restraint never lasted long. When he resumed killing, he did so gradually, sometimes beginning with a terminally ill patient, Team Janet said. It was as if he were entering the pool at the shallow end to see if he could swim. But by 1997, Shipman seemed to be spiraling out of his own control. In the course of just 1 year, he committed 37 murders, meaning that he killed the patient every 10 or so days. A local GP who was often asked to co-sign cremation forms for Shipman began to see a ghoulish pattern emerge. She reported him to the local coroner. So did a taxi driver who drove many elderly patients to their appointments at Shipman's surgery. He phoned the police. Authorities concluded there wasn't enough evidence to suggest that Shipman was anything but a kind GP who went above and beyond for his elderly patients during their final days. Shipman might have gone on killing for years. But in 1998, he set his sights on the former mayoress of Hyde, Kathleen Grundy. This time he diverged so wildly from his own modus operandi and made so many blunders in the process that the mask slipped and the monster beneath was finally revealed. The angel of death meets his match. Like 79.5% of Shipman's known victims, Grundy was an older woman. And at 81, she was still extremely active in the town she loved, taking part in charity work and maintaining a wide circle of friends. On June 23rd, 1998, she went to her regular GP surgery to have her ears syringed, and he offered to make a house call the next day to see how she was going. 4 hours after Shipman visited Miss Grundy at her home, her friends found her dead, sitting fully clothed on her couch. Distraught, they called Shipman back to the house, where he declared that his long-time patient must have suffered from a cardiac arrest. He then phoned the local coroner's office and offered to write out the death certificate, stating old age as the cause. By 1998, Shipman was well practiced in taking a patient's life without arousing much suspicion. But in choosing Miss Grundy as his victim, he put himself in the path of her formidable daughter, Angela Woodruff. Something about her mother's sudden death didn't sit right with the lawyer, despite Shipman's claims that she was in poor health and may have been addicted to morphine. A month after she died, Miss Woodruff made a startling discovery. She had been written out of the will. I give all my estate, money and house to my doctor, Miss Grundy apparently wrote in a will, drawn up just weeks before her death. My family are not in need, and I want to reward him for all the care he has given to me and the people of Hyde. Miss Woodruff immediately went to the police and would not give up until they opened an investigation. Once they knew that I was a lawyer, it became much easier, she told the BBC in 2000. I suppose I was more likely to be objective being a solicitor. I also realized the seriousness of the case straight away. The evidence against Shipman was still undeniable. Miss Grundy's will, leaving her £780,000 estate to her doctor, was deemed a hopelessly incompetent forgery by the Shipman Inquiry. He had typed it himself on a manual typewriter police found in his surgery, leaving a fingerprint on the document and sending it to a local solicitor who had never represented Miss Grundy before. Miss Woodruff had also resisted Shipman's pressure to have her mother's body cremated, and when her remains were exhumed, they found lethal amounts of morphine in her liver. Shipman was arrested, and police soon began to dig into his past, where they discovered untold horrors. To this day, psychiatrists remain puzzled over Shipman's decision to forge the will. Some who contributed to the Shipman Inquiry believe he had lost touch with reality and thought himself to be untouchable. Others suspect that either consciously or subconsciously he wanted to be caught. By 1998 he was killing one patient a week, and his insatiable appetite for death only seemed to grow. I think he might have devised a fantasy plan by which he could obtain Miss Grundy's money, run away, and stop being a doctor, concluded Dame Janet. Whether he needed to end the killings only because he feared detection, or whether there were other psychological needs, I do not know. But I think that the intolerable tension between his drive to kill and his need to stop lay at the root of this fantasy. That is the best explanation I can offer for the final event. For decades, Shipman relied on society's disregard for the elderly to get away with murder. He focused his violence on women, old ladies, whose deaths might seem inevitable, but to people who knew and loved his victims. They were much more than that. They were grandmothers, matriarchs, active members of the high community who still had life to live. After insisting he was innocent and weeping through his trial, Shipman was sentenced to life in prison in January 2000. 2 years later, a day before his 58th birthday, Shipman died by suicide in his prison cell. Some relatives of his victims said they felt cheated because he never offered an explanation for his unimaginable actions. But the timing of his death, 2 years before his 60th birthday, meant that his wife Primrose was able to claim a tax-free lump sum of more than £200,000, as well as an annual payout of $20,000 under the National Health Services pension scheme. The Shipman Inquiry was convened to investigate the scale of the doctor's crimes, how institutions had failed to stop him for so long, and what changes were needed to prevent it happening again. In 2005, after taking 2,500 witness statements and analysing 270,000 pages of evidence, Dame Janet released a 5,000-page report. In it, she called for a shake-up of the procedures that follow a death in Britain and recommended a new coroner's service with legal and medical expertise. She said coroners should be backed by a team of expert investigators to ensure that a homicidal doctor would not be able to exploit the system again. As a general practitioner, Shipman was trusted implicitly by his patients and their families. He betrayed their trust in a way to an end got away with it for so long. Yeah, that's insane. It's very interesting though. It's good that they decided to shake up the system and make changes afterwards so that it can't happen again, you know. It takes more than one person to finalize these reports and investigate the deaths and whatnot. That's very good. And now, before we end tonight's video, we just have a quick little section to some mass murders or spree killers. We have Michael Ryan, 1987. He shot and killed 16 people and himself in the Hungerford massacre across Berkshire and Wiltshire, using legally owned semi-automatic rifles and handguns, which led to tighter UK firearm laws. Thomas Hamilton, 1996, shot and killed 16 young children and one teacher at Dunblane Primary School in Scotland, before committing suicide, prompting the total ban on handguns in Britain. Derek Bird, 2010, a taxi driver who shot and killed 12 people and injured 11 others during a Cumbria shooting spree across various West Cumbria locations before taking his own life. Jeremy Bamber, 1985, convicted of murdering 5 members of his adoptive family at White House Farm in Essex, serving a whole life prison order. And Mick Philpott, 2012, sentenced for manslaughter after deliberately setting fire to his Derby home, which resulted in the deaths of 6 of his children. It's insane. If you guys would like a more in-depth of any of these incidents, then maybe we can do that for our next true crime video. I don't know when it will be, or we will just, pick a different incident, a different killer, or whatever, to have a little look at. But that is it for tonight's video, guys. I hope that you found this at least interesting. I don't know how relaxing it can be, with no sleep and let's not meet and stuff. Either we know that the stories aren't real or the people got away